Starfleet ship design is an evolving affair with new innovations and developments being tested on newer ships before being implemented on others. The varying technologies provided by all the Federation's member worlds are so numerous that not every vessel will feature every single advancement. Even those ships that serve as the pinnacle of a design era, such as the Excelsior or Galaxy class, only have a select few innovations that make for the balanced all-rounder. The Intrepid Class Starship was not designed with this approach in mind, but more to redefine the method of exploration going forwards. While ships like the Galaxy were made to undertake long missions and be self-sufficient for years, such ships were hardly feasible all the time. For the most part in Starfleet's history, this had been its approach to reaching those far away and unexplored frontiers of its knowledge, but the Intrepid would try something else. It was smart, observant, and it was fast. In real life, the Intrepid design came about in 1993 with the need for a hero ship for Star Trek Voyager. The brief was a new generation vessel that would be sleeker but smaller than the Enterprise D. A crew number was settled on, around 200, which informed the scale of the ship. As time went on, the idea of a ship being stranded away from Starfleet was always on the table, so Rick Sternbach and Michael Okuda began planning tech and designs that would allow for such a ship to persist, and the role for the Intrepid class began to form at the behest of the plot. A good reminder that law is there to service designs, not just to regulate concepts. Early designs of Voyager had it with the very identifiably fast and streamlined shape, narrower and more pointed than contemporary vessels. There were several designs with fins that almost gave the ship a shark-like silhouette, and by the ending of the design stage, recognisable features were identifiable, such as the saucer and hull shapes and deflector design. The fins and more angular corners of the vessel were removed and smoothed out, but several models were constructed of various designs. The eventual studio model was made by Tony Menninger, and the Intrepid class was finalised. This is pretty interesting to me, as the concepts and ideas for the vessel were very much solidified before the designs began, in much the same way as a ship would be constructed for real. A requirement in the fleet is identified, then the technology for that is created, and then implemented into a design that's refined. The tech at play within Voyager was as much a concern as the look itself. In universe, I'm going to attempt to refrain from studying Voyager too much in this video, as that ship was far from a typical Intrepid class, considering the number of modifications it had made to it over the course of its journey, which sounds like a video in its own right I should cover. So, the Intrepid was made to fulfill a need in Starfleet, a ship that could travel out to those distant places and get back again without resorting to things like 5-year missions. This led to a deep space explorer that would blitz across known space at breakneck speeds without slowing down for months if needed, so it could then begin exploring and mapping its destination and reporting back to Starfleet. For this reason, its focus was scientific survey and prolonged fast warp travel. However, encountering the unknown is Starfleet's job, so other areas, although not the focus, were not neglected, such as ambassadorial suites and recreational facilities, although these were noticeably more compact than vessels like the Galaxy or later Sovereign. So the Intrepid was basically a leaner vessel than others of its era, and a rather major shift in Starfleet design philosophy, heralding many designs to come. Its length was 344 metres, height was 64 metres, and 132 wide, and it had a mass of 700,000 tonnes spread over 15 decks. Its crew complement varied depending on the ship, but it could comfortably house up to 200 people. It had a single shuttle bay at the rear, which housed 4 standard shuttlecraft and 2 worker bees, although it featured several offside hangars to store small craft. It also had a craft called the Aero Shuttle, which was specifically designed for this class of ship and docked in the underside of the saucer section. This small vessel was basically to operate as a scout and planetary survey ship capable of atmospheric flight, but was never seen in use. A reason for this is speculated that risking its loss was too great to Voyager, considering they could not just get a replacement made at space dock, so they relied more on the shuttles and eventual Delta Flyer. Additionally, the Intrepid class was capable of flight in atmosphere and planetary landings. The warp assembly is where the vessel shined, from the core to its nacelles. The warp core itself was one of the most advanced produced in the 2370s, and when it was launched, the Intrepid was the undisputed fastest vessel in the Federation. It was a Class 9 trycyclic core, rated to last for 3 years before major overhaul. The nacelles themselves had a unique feature of variable warp geometry, or hinges, built into the pylons that could allow for manipulation of the warp field for faster and longer flight at higher warp factors, making micro-adjustments to optimize its flight and reduce subspace drag. To give comparison, the Defiant and Galaxy classes operated with a Class 7 drive. This allowed the Intrepid a final velocity of warp 9.6 over a prolonged time frame, and theoretically it could travel at warp 6.2 until it was out of fuel easily, while hitting a maximum of 9.975, which it could hold for 12 hours, far eclipsing every other ship in the fleet. The Intrepid also had some of the most advanced sensor systems included, which were visible from the exposed arrays around the saucer section, which could observe up to 300 million separate stars at once and had exemplary range and clarity. Many of these advanced features were made possible by the rapid computational speed of its computer core, which not only utilised standard isolinear technology, but also had a newer approach and arguably the bigger experimental tech on board: its bioneural circuitry. This circuitry was organic and suspended in a conductive gel, allowing for malleable processing and a quicker response time than previous technology. In terms of armaments, the Intrepid was pretty average for a Starfleet vessel, considering combat was not its focus. However, with its rapid computational speed, it could effectively compile data and adjust its phaser and shielding at a rapid pace, granting it great on-the-fly adaptability. It had 14 Type 10 phaser arrays and 4 torpedo launchers, and an armoury of photon torpedoes and several tricobalt torpedoes, a very powerful and limited armament that was restricted by the Kittimer Accords. Its deflector shielding came with a variety of specific scientific applications, such as multiphasic shields for warding off hazardous phenomena spread over its 14 emitters. The prototype for the class was the USS Intrepid NCC 74600, and the class was named for the prior Intrepid class of the 22nd century, and work began on it in 2360. Construction took some time, and the first major obstacle in its design was the discovery of subspace damage caused by warp drive in 2370, when the Intrepid class was almost complete. The Intrepid had already been undergoing test flights in 2369 with great results in manoeuvrability and speed, warp, and impulse, so this limiting warp factor was a major issue. Apocrypha cites this as the reason for the variable warp geometry, that rather than redesign the class, which was already on the cusp of entering production, the Starfleet engineers of Utopia Planitia merely adapted the design to compensate. Future ships would overcome this with less harmful designs, leading to the lower profile vessels of the 2370s onwards. With these issues overcome, production on the new Intrepid class vessels was given the go-ahead, with several more commissioned in 2371, including the USS Voyager. These ships were constructed primarily at Utopia Planitia, but flown to other docks in system for launch, such as McKinley's Station. It looks like the Dominion War lowered the rate of Intrepid production, as exploration unfortunately had to take a back seat. Those that were present became ideal diplomatic ships, couriers, and scouts, as their fast speed allowed them to outpace most dangers, and their observational skills were among the highest in the fleet. For this reason, we see the Intrepid-class ships acting as hosts to meetings and carrying around the Admiralty, VIPs and the like, while evading direct combat. Additionally, they were carrying lots of advanced tech, so Starfleet probably wanted to keep these away from the Dominion in case they were captured and reverse-engineered, at least until these innovative designs were implemented on more than just one class of ship. So, the Intrepid class was hailed as the most advanced ship produced in 2370, and while that title may have been stolen by the Sovereign soon after, the Intrepid remained able to sustain higher velocity warp for longer and was still the premier vessel for deep space exploration when a specific destination was in mind, while the Sovereign or Luna was better suited to cruise around an unknown location for a time gathering data. It's one of my favourite ships, and one of the first to address the Starfleet design ethos going forwards, with more streamlined designs with less neck and overall a narrower profile. It also had better space utilisation, striking a good balance between being compact but still comfortable, sitting between the Defiant and Galaxy class in those extremes. It's also one of the only ships in Starfleet that can catch a cold. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the Intrepid class. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time for another lore video. So until then, thanks again, and goodbye.